Hi, I'm Conor Friedersdorf, a staff writer at The Atlantic magazine.
And I am Phoebe Connelly, senior editor at Yahoo News.
Let's start by talking about cute animals, and we will guarantee that the whole internet will flock to our conversation
and excellent
admire
idea.
it.
Excellent idea.
With coos of ooh and ah. There was a piece that Alexis Madrigal at The Atlantic wrote about BuzzFeed, one of the sites that traffics in a lot of cute animals. Mm-hmm. And he's basically trying to track down where do those photos of confused otters and kittens and all the rest, where do they come from? And the answer is that some of them come from Reuters and AP and other subscription news feeds that BuzzFeed subscribes to. But others of them just sort of come from the internet. And it's very hard to track down who actually originally took them. And Alexis was talking about how this puts BuzzFeed in a potential dicey legal situation because they are responsible for crediting the photos that they run or for having the rights to the photos that they run in a way that social networking sites like Pinterest are not, where users are just sharing photos. But I think you agree that there's an interesting question that goes beyond that, just how should we be crediting people whose images are later used in ways that they never imagined?
Right. Well, one of the things that I think is so interesting about this story is it brings up the fact that anyone can create a meme, which I think we all sort of knew, right? But because BuzzFeed has made it clear that they're really getting into the news business, that they are, also doing hard news, I think that's part of why the idea of BuzzFeed having to talk about how they credit their photos becomes such an interesting conversation. To me, actually, the thing that was really brought up for me by this article is that if you are someone who engages in, doing news and you're also on Tumblr, etc., that I think it's really worth your time to take that extra step, not just to purchase the photo from AP or from Getty, but also to make sure that you're including that photographer credit when you're running the photo. I think it's a small thing, and that's sort of beyond the, is this fair use or isn't this fair use? But I think it's just being kind of a good citizen of the internet and recognizing that those photographers are also in the practice of creating work that you're then using and remixing, which is all part of fair use, and I think is part of what is so awesome about creating things.
Yeah, and it's interesting. As I was thinking about this, I was thinking how even in the earliest days of the blogosphere, people generally credited
that's right.
the authors of words. Mm-hmm. And, whether it was with a link, whether it was with a block quote, and this person says this, it was just sort of something that people intuitively did and understood to automatically do. Mm-hmm. And that isn't the case. And I wonder why that isn't the case with photographs, if it's just that it's more difficult to track down or whether people value photographs less in some strange way. What do you think?
I wonder, Connor, if it's because it is, for some of us, a different medium. I mean, now I think with the rise of camera-enabled smartphones, we're all taking photographs much more so than previously. But I don't know that in the early days of the internet, images were just a much harder concept. I mean, first of all, they were huge. The file size was huge. Incorporating them onto your page was a different thing. I remember back in the day when my favorite sites were sites that allowed you to load them without images because my internet connection was so slow. Right? That was actually a toggle option on the New York Times. So some of it is that I think we weren't forced into that conversation in the same way we were immediately forced into giving credit with text.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think there's something to the idea that once something is a meme, people feel like they're justified in stripping it from context and just using it wherever, and they don't think about credit as much when it comes to a meme, and I wonder. I mean, to me, it makes intuitive sense that if someone is going to Photoshop the pepper spraying cop from UC Davis into something like that painting A Sunday Afternoon on the Isle of Le Grand Jatte, right? Are they going to have to credit the artist of the painting? It seems almost silly to do so in that case when we're talking about, one image that becomes famous by meme, another image that is already famous in just common culture. So line drawing, I think, comes a little bit harder when we're in this new realm, and no one knows quite how to treat memes yet. I agree with you that we should err on the side of trying to credit photographers when possible. I'm just not exactly sure how much work I think someone should have to do to try to track it down.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. I don't know that I would want to say, but there's also then that option that you could throw up a post with a photograph and ask your readership to let you know if they know the provenance of the image. They know where it came from.
Yeah, that's true.
So
a photo credit that's like, help fill in this credit, or email here if you know who did this.
Yeah, and that's also indicating that you really want to be giving credit to the originator of the photograph.
Yeah, and hopefully meta tags will make this easier over time as more and more photographs get tagged. But I think there will always be that mystery otter out there where no one knows who took the photograph in the beginning. Maybe being that close to an otter was a gift enough. I know some people who would think so. So let's keep talking about photographs. There's a new digital camera that BlackBerry has just introduced in the sort of, we're going to roll this out in the future phase. Mm-hmm. And what it does is it allows you to sort of change the moment that you're capturing. In other words, if I'm taking a picture of a group of 4 people, and you know how you always get 2 of them are smiling and look great, and one has their eyes closed, and the other one it's just a second off. And this allows you to go to their faces and to jump ahead a moment in time or a moment back, not for all 4 of them, but for each of them as individuals, right? So I can go to the face with the eyes closed and sort of ratchet it back 3 seconds and have the other people at that moment 3 seconds ahead. So I get everybody's best moment in the photograph.
So it's sort of taking like a video and then pulling stills from different moments in the video into one composite image?
Right, exactly. Exactly. Or at least I assume that's how it works from watching the little video. Okay. And people can click over and watch it. I don't know how else it would work than actually capturing a little bit of video.
Magic. Harry Potter is in the camera.
Well, right, exactly. But the implications of it are kind of magical seeming. We're taking photographs from being this thing that is a reliable, discrete moment to a sort of cubist photograph almost.
Although, Conor, I mean, I guess I just push back a little bit as someone who knows photographers, and if you've ever worked with Photoshop, that capability of being able to. I recently did a fellowship where we all got together for the group photo, and he took several frames, and the photographer told us, part of why I take several frames is so that when I get the best shot, I can crop your eyes for the one person who had their eyes closed from that previous shot and put them in there. So the idea that we can manipulate photos isn't totally unusual.
Yeah, it's true. We've long been able to manipulate photos, and they've become less and less trustworthy over time. I don't know. This feels different to me. Maybe it's not. I think it feels different to me because this seems like it could become the standard. And right now, my default assumption when I look at a photograph of a collection of people is that it is capturing a discrete moment. And if this is widespread enough, I think I will look at those same photographs and not trust that anymore. And what I'm wrestling with is whether that matters to me. Because, one reason why we take these photographs is just we want this memory of these people that we like who are together at a certain event or a certain time.
Right.
And so who cares? But I don't know. It seems a little bit less real. I wonder, I don't know. Does it bother you? Do you think you would enjoy photographs less or it wouldn't matter to you at all?
I think that still there's a different... We've also sort of seen the rise of videos. Certainly my sister has videos of herself as a child. She's 10 years younger than me that I just don't have.
Right.
But I also think that at the same time, we're like, this calls, actually, the first thing I thought of when you started telling me about this is the Impossible Project, which brought back, they went back and are remanufacturing Polaroid film, which went out of business. You couldn't get Polaroid film anymore. And so they're now remanufacturing it so that you can take Polaroids again.
Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of times their film actually is not, it's not as perfect as Polaroid film used to be. So your images will actually come out even more damaged than a Polaroid image would have if you ever, I don't know if you ever took Polaroids before. So at the same time that we're creating this technology that to me what it does is it's taking tools that you used to have to pay thousands of dollars and have an entire computer set up for, and it's putting them in the palm of your hand. We're also, there's people working equally as fast to go back to a time to an image that you literally can't, I mean, I guess you can, right, you can mess with the Polaroid as it's developing. You can put it in the sun or, you know, bend it or scratch the surface, etc., so that the image is less perfect. But where it's very much a frozen, captured, imperfect moment in time.
Yeah. I'm also really interested in this tension between photography and video, and which is going to become more or less prevalent. I mean, we're getting to the point where the bandwidth is not an obstacle anymore, and so any site can afford to put, you know, I often put up at the top of my post, I'll often put an embedded video instead of a photograph, depending on what I'm talking about. And
right, but you know, actually, it's funny that you should talk about the tension between those, because I spend a lot of time on Tumblr and a lot of time thinking about, you know, what gets shared and reshared on Tumblr, because I run the Yahoo Politics Tumblr. And videos actually tend to do not as well, I think, because you don't get that immediate sense of what's in the video. And maybe somebody chose a great cover photo for the video, right? So that when it pops up, you get a freeze frame. But something like...
It's much less efficient.
What's that?
It's much less efficient to watch.
Right, it's much less efficient, and it takes so much more of my time. I can't just scan down my dashboard and see all of these great photographs. Instead, you know, I have to commit to, you know, 30 seconds of my time, which actually feels like a lot of time when you're going through your dashboard.
Yeah, although that has commercial implications, right? The fact that you have to commit to it is something that advertisers like, because they feel like if you're watching this video, your eyes are going to be glued to what's on the screen. So if there's a pre-roll ad, or if there are pop-up ads in the middle, or if there's product placement you can imagine in some future world, I think that they have a greater confidence that you're seeing what's playing, as opposed to photographs where, you know, there's everything from ad blockers to just scrolling past and not noticing what's on the side. So in the commercial realm, that's going to play a role in the relative performance of video and photographs. But I actually think, I don't know why this hasn't happened, but so I'm sitting in this house that I'm renting right now with my fiance, and as I look around, it's, you know, there are paintings on all of the walls, and the same thing in my grandparents' house, there are paintings on all of the walls, and I wonder if there's going to be a time, why there isn't a time already, where big photographs haven't taken the place of paintings. I'm someone who really likes photography, and I can imagine a bunch of photographs that I would love to put all over the walls, and when I have a place that I'm in for longer than I'm probably going to be in this place, I'll do that. But I keep expecting that there's going to be this kind of resurgence of interest in hanging things on walls, and that people are going to be tired of looking at screens, and they're not going to have digital photographs for that reason all over their houses. They're not going to just have flat screen TVs.
Right, they're going to put up big prints of photographs.
Yeah, that's what I think should happen, but it doesn't seem to be.
I think we just need to set you up with the right galleries, because I think there is a lot of really beautiful photography being created right now and being printed large format and going up on walls.
Yeah, maybe there are. Maybe I'm just not hanging out with the the right crowd, but I still see painting still seems to me to be the default, and I want to see more photographs. And there are, like you said, there's just like an endless supply of great photographs out there for every possible aesthetic taste. So I don't know. Maybe I'll start a home photo gallery, and people can come in and buy things they like off my walls, and then I'll put new things.
come for all of your photo needs.
Yes. So I want to ask you, Phoebe, do you think that this is the most important election in the history of the planet?
The history of the planet? I would not go that far. I mean, every election is the most important during that cycle, right? Because it's the reason why I'm getting up and reading my iPhone when I haven't even had coffee yet, is to find out who said what and what moves are happening. And
Yes, it is the most important to your livelihood.
Yeah, exactly.
History.
Exactly. Much as the last election was equally important to my livelihood at that time. I think putting an absolute on an event that happens every 4 years feels a little faulty. Also because you have absolutely no idea what's going to come around the next cycle.
So I was going through some of these things in a piece I wrote at the Atlantic, and it was just shocking to me the number of people who said this is the most important election of our lifetimes in successive elections. So there would be
I'm actually surprised. So you're finding people are using that about this election, which I could actually see people using that about the last election, just because Obama's candidacy, and certainly in the primary, the fact that it became a race between an African American and a female candidate was certainly unprecedented. I don't know if I would use important, but there is a sense of like unprecedented, first of its kind, etc. But it's a phrase I would be hesitant to use this time around.
Yeah, so I found people using it this time around. I found people the same people using it for the 2010 midterms, saying that was the most important election since the Civil War.
Midterms can never be the most important election. Impossible.
There were people who said it about 2004 and 2000. There are people who a bunch of people have said it about multiple elections in succession, and I think that the fact that no one really said it about 2008, or at least when I was going through, I didn't find. I'm sure people said it, but I didn't find a ton of people saying it about 2008. And I think that this is telling, because I think that it was kind of clear that Obama was going to win in 2008. It wasn't that close of an election. Everyone had George W. Bush fatigue. McCain wasn't that strong of a candidate, and I think that people say this not because they actually think it's the most important election sometimes, but because they want to motivate the people on their side to go out and vote, and they want to push back against this idea that, they're politicians, they're all the same anyway, I'm just going to stay home. Right? And I think that conservatives in this election are worried that people are going to feel that way about Romney, that their side isn't going to be really excited about Romney. And so you see more of this, this is the most important election in American history. This is, as Dennis Prager put it, it's a referendum on a plebiscite on the American Revolution, I think is what he said.
Oh my!
And I guarantee you that if you go back to him, if Obama wins and you go back to him and you say, does Obama now have a mandate to overturn the American Revolution? I don't think he'll say yes, but 4 years from now he might say that is the most important.
So you're calling for us to refrain from making any election, or just this election in particular, the most important election in history?
I think it's fair game to look back. I mean, I don't know if it's a pressing question to argue over what's the most important election, but I think we can look back and say that certain elections were more important than others. I think, the election of 1860 is one that comes up a lot when people are talking historically, because there's the idea that the Civil War could have turned out differently if Abraham Lincoln would have been president, and maybe so. It's hard to know, counterfactual. I think even an election like 2000, I think what that teaches us is that it's hard to know at the time how important an election is going to be.
Right, you just have no idea. I mean, I think without the context of the years that come after the fact, there's just no call to use an absolute.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, I would say it's impossible to know until after the fact. And also, as we look back in American history, we don't think that a lot of elections were even competitive for the most important, right? And that should tell us something, that if we look back over the decades and not that many jump out at us, then it's not very likely that there's two in a row during our lifetime. So yes, I say no more most important.
No more. All right, you're calling off the most important election. Is there anything that is the most important this year that you would share with us?
What do you mean? That is the most important in politics?
This is the most important year for tomatoes, for blockbuster movies, for ebooks. I don't know. I'm at a loss. Tell me what's the most important.
Question.
This is the most important year for X.
Yeah, I wonder what's really important that's going on right now. I think it is. I think if it's the most important year for something, then it's probably some sort of scientific advance or that we haven't seen yet. I mean, one thing that's striking to me is how quickly science is moving, and it's terrifying to me, actually. Like maybe we'll find out that this is the year that someone created the virus that killed all of humanity 5 years from now, to put a dark spin on it. But, you know, also maybe it could be the year that they find a cure for cancer. Maybe it could be a year. It seems like, again, looking back in history, it seems like these times when things like the polio vaccine were invented, and also times when various, times when the television or the radio or these kinds of things were invented, seem to be a lot more important than any political going on. Mm-hmm. And I think if something's going to affect the future, it's going to be either medicine or technology, science, those kinds of things. The Large Hadron Collider maybe blowing up all of Earth. Who knows? How
about the most important year for women in television? Since we were going to discuss a comedy that it turns out you and I both like quite a bit, which is The New Girl. But it is one of a crop of television shows, including Lena Dunham's Girls, that are produced, and I actually don't know if it's all female writers behind The New Girl, but
no, it's not. But no, I don't know how many are female writers,
but certainly it's it's Zooey Deschanel's show, and she is the producer behind it, and did sort of introduce it, and a lot of the discussion around the show when it came on was about whether her character was too twee.
Yeah, give us a definition of twee.
That she was a little too mannered and kind of reticent and cute for her own good.
Right. In other words, so is it that her personality is contrived, or is it that it's contrived in a certain way?
Contrived in a certain way, and a certain way, I think twee implies a little bit of, like, cute, like, almost too cute, too saccharine.
Okay, got it. I hadn't been aware of this idea of the rise of females on TV, but when I think about it, there are several, I guess, women-driven shows, and also I think 30 Rock is a big deal in that it is a vehicle for a female comedian in the same way that New Girl is a vehicle for a woman in a sitcom in a way that you didn't see a whole lot of before. There was a great piece in New York Magazine of Roseanne writing an essay about the rise of her show and how hard she had to fight to portray blue-collar people on television, and also what it was like being a woman in the industry. And after Roseanne went off the air, I'm sure I'm forgetting things, but it seemed like there was a pretty long time before there was anything so female comic focused.
Agreed. So, right, and other shows that are sort of of the moment right now are Two Broke Girls, which is another show, sort of a half-hour sketch comedy. But let's go back to The New Girl, because we're just going to focus on all the girls shows. We're going to go with The New Girl, not Two Broke Girls or Girls, which I have to say I haven't caught up with because I do not yet have HBO, so I've not had a chance to jump on that one. Right. Why do you like The New Girl, Connor? Tell me.
I've given a lot of thought to this, and I have answers that are less precise than I would like, because I don't watch a ton of TV. When I do watch TV, I don't watch a ton of sitcoms, and yet I find that I've watched New Girl. It's partly because it's been accessible on Hulu. And
hold that thought, readers. We are coming back to Hulu later in this conversation.
Yes, exactly. And so it's partly that, but it's also, I don't know, I mean, I like Zooey Deschanel's character more than I like the writing. I think that for some reason it seems to reflect it reflects a perspective that I haven't seen in other shows and that I recognize in people that I know, in friends that I know, of people in my generation. And it seems to just be keyed in to some of the outside references that I'm paying attention to. So I'll read something on the internet, and all of a sudden I will see it pop up in an episode of New Girl, and I'll think, that's interesting. They must be reading the same things as me. So it's partly that. It's also that I like the idea of a show that is portraying mixed gender apartments, like people living as roommates that aren't romantic relationships, because that's something that I and a lot of my friends have experienced, and I think that New Girl gets the dynamic right. And one thing that I hope they don't do is have Zoe start dating one of her roommates.
I totally agree with that. The fact that the formation there is of friendship and of a female moving into a apartment with a bunch of guys, and that it's about them rallying around and supporting her as a friend, not... you notice that they haven't, over the course of the show, tried to set her up on a bunch of dates. I mean, that's sort of a plot point at one point. Or they'll talk about her dating life, but they'll talk about her dating life as her friends, not as people who are interested in dating her, not as people who are, actively trying to get her back and set up on the market. They're interested in her being happy.
Yes, and they're also... there's a level at which they're guys and they're attracted to her and acknowledge that in a way that is sometimes disconcerting to her. But at the same time, they do not pursue her, and they keep boundaries, and they wouldn't want to pursue her. I think it's a pretty interesting and complex dynamic that they're capturing. And especially because in a sitcom setting, it's not serious drama, and so everything is kind of a little bit unrealistic, a little bit contrived, and yet within that framework, they've managed to get something that rings true to me.
Well, I also think that they've done something really interesting. So there's been a lot of backlash around this idea of the bro. Like, what is a bro? What does it mean? What does it mean to, because it gets used as this term of derision, right? Oh, he's such a bro. They're acting like bros, etc. So I really like what they've done with the character of Schmidt, because the show sets him up to be this classic bro, if you will, right? So, has read all of his GQs, is styled within an inch of his life, works out, has perfect hair, super into girls. There's even one episode, I don't remember what it's called, but it's all about, so the roommates all make him put money into this jar whenever he does something that is douchey. And the whole plot point is like, I think it's called The Story of the 50, right? So it's, what did he do that he had to put $50 in this jar? But he's also become one of the most lovable characters, right? So they've set him up to be this character. They're like, oh, I'm totally over it. And in fact, he's very lovable and human, and, he has feelings for this girl he starts dating, and he puts up with this relationship where, he really wants to be very public about the fact that they're together, and she's not interested, and he has to sort of deal and struggle with that.
Right.
So I think that's one of the reasons, I think his character is one of the reasons why the show has really worked for me, is that they've taken what should be a cliche and fleshed out that character, and you understand why you love the bros in your life.
He is the lovable bro.
He is the lovable bro, yes.
Yeah. Another thing I like about the show is that although it's not a show about money in the same way that Roseanne was a show where the next paycheck was always a present plot point. At the same time, they're reasonably realistically... the money that they have is reasonably realistic. They live in a bigger apartment than they would really, but that's kind of true of all shows. But unlike a show like Friends, where money was hardly ever mentioned at all, there were just these people of, like, a waitress living in New York City in a huge apartment who somehow dresses very expensively and always does everything that she wants to do without ever worrying about any of it.
Right.
The New Girl apartment is kind of sparsely decorated, and they've pulled things in off of Craigslist. And
there's the broken garbage disposal.
Right. It resembles more closely what life would be. And again, it's still a sitcom, so it's not as if this is a huge theme, but it at least is.
Well, and they've also played around with the idea that you can be at the same age point, same maturity point, and be at radically different places in how much money you're making and what you're doing with it, right? Which is really where they played around with oh God, I cannot think of the actress's name, but there was a woman who briefly came on and she sort of dated the bartender roommate, right? And she was a lawyer and he was tending bar, even though he had also gone to law school. So she's like very successful. She's putting in hours until 9 or 10 p.m. every night. She's, wearing these impeccably tailored suits. And they also kind of had a face-off between her character and Jess, where she says, listen, Jess, I can't be cute and approachable and funny because in my profession, in my job, those just aren't characteristics that I can display. It's not professional in my job, where you can because you're a teacher and those interactions with younger kids are something that allows you to be cute and funny in a way that I can't as a professional lawyer.
Right.
So I think, which is to say that, to kind of build off your point about money, the show is also taking on the different roles and the different responsibilities we have to take on as grown-ups, depending on, what profession we go into and what roles we have to play within those jobs.
So as a final thought on this subject, one more thing that interests me is I wonder where these characters end up in 10 years. And what I mean is that if you were going to make a show about these characters, but they're all 10 years older. They're not the people on Parenthood. They're not the people in 30-something. They're not the people on Seventh Heaven, to be sure.
Connor, question: have you rewatched 30-something since it originally aired?
No, I would like to.
Okay, so I did. I tried, and it's so bad. It's really painful.
Really?
Because I sort of nostalgically remembered my parents watching it, kind of like half watching it
I
myself.
remember my parents loving it.
Right. Oh, I found it totally atrocious. It's like all very upper middle class, very waspy. Like I just did not identify with it at all. I found it totally different from what I remembered, which was really interesting to go back. So we should both rewatch it, I guess, and discuss on at a future conversation.
Yeah, but so I don't know where they end up. Do they? I mean, the only show where you have people who are single and living in a city that I can think of is Seinfeld, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Frasier, right?
I don't think
weren't they? They were all single. They were living in the city.
Yeah, that's true. Although Frasier, they're not going to end up like Frasier, though.
True.
Or especially Niles. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happens. I don't know. I don't know where our generation ends up in 10 years. It is really what I'm saying.
Still sharing an apartment because we're all broke.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see. So one thing you mentioned is that New Girl appears on Hulu. You can watch a lot of the episodes. And
yes.
It's a place where you can watch a lot of TV shows. The networks kind of went in on it and made it so that you could watch a lot of TV at free for first, and then they went to a partial pay model so that you can get Hulu Plus and watch everything immediately, or you can wait for a few days after it airs, or maybe a week after it airs, and then get it for free.
Right.
But it's changing again, I guess. And
yeah, so there was an article in the New York Post, which I know other people have tried to do some reporting on, and it hasn't been confirmed. But the Post reported that Hulu is considering moving to a different model, and the pressure, according to the Post, is coming from the networks. And that model you would only be able to watch on Hulu if you had an existing cable subscription. Which is also kind of funny to me because I have to say most of the shows that I watch, I recently got a television, but previously just had a laptop, was just watching, on Hulu when I had a free night. I was watching network television. I wasn't watching AMC. I wasn't watching HBO shows, etc. But they still want you to have a cable subscription before they let you on to watch these shows.
How easy is it to watch network TV for free now? Can you do that?
Gosh, I don't know that I've tried. I feel like for sitcoms, I watch it on Hulu. For live news events, I'll usually go to a particular network that'll be broadcasting it live, or I'll stay late in my office and watch it from here if I'm doing it for work.
Yeah, I'm interested because I remember a while ago when they did the big switch from TV antennas to digital, I guess. And, there were, I guess, old people who didn't know how to get TV for a while, and they had to, I don't know. It obviously wasn't a big transition in my life, but I don't know how easy it is to watch network TV. I would say that, since DVRs are so common now, I can't imagine a lot of people who have cable subscriptions watching a ton of stuff on Hulu. And maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know.
Right, so how many people are watching it on Hulu versus... Well, if you hadn't bothered to DVR it, right, then you could just watch it. You could catch it on Hulu later.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, I mean, watching TV when I want to watch it is a big deal for me. And
do you think it's something that you and I take for granted? I mean, right? We assume that we can watch it whenever we want. I mean, I assume that within like a 2-week span, I'll probably be able to catch it on Hulu or something similar. Even before Hulu showed up, a lot of times, I know ABC was broadcasting. You could watch it on, I think it's called like ABC Go or something. You could watch episodes for about a week or two before they would expire.
Yeah, I think actually my preferred mode of watching TV is probably very different from the average person. I think I would prefer it if I had to pay $1 an hour for whatever I was watching.
So you had to pay for the privilege of watching all of those shows? Made you think twice?
Yeah, because I think that, first I think that it would take away all of the time I waste watching TV. And for me, that isn't a ton of time because I'm often living in places without TVs. But there are definitely times, like I'll be visiting my parents, or I'll happen to live in a place where cable is set up, and I'll watch a show that I want to watch. I'll watch, Mad Men, say, which is a show that I follow and that I want to follow.
Yeah.
But then, I'll see when I go to turn off the TV that there's an episode of Law and Order coming on, and then that can just suck me into like three episodes of Law and Order all in a row.
Or maybe you catch yourself watching 4 episodes of Say Yes to the Dress Bridesmaids edition in a row, which I recently did, and it was terrifying and amazing. And America, I encourage all of you to watch that show, because it's going to make you think twice about ever getting married. Let me just say that.
I watched this show, what's it called? Someone Takes Over. Anyway, it was a show about a woman, a no-nonsense woman with a British accent, or maybe an Australian accent, I forget. And she would go and take over salons, and she would tell the salon owners what they were doing wrong, and it was kind of a business turnaround show.
What?
And this was on the flight that I was watching this. I think it was probably a JetBlue flight. And I watched, their half-hour episodes. I probably watched like 9 of them, something ridiculous. And so I have the capacity to do this. I have the capacity to watch a lot of TV and to not really mind doing it. And then afterwards, I'm like, oh, God, I could have done or gone surfing or like all kinds of different things that I would have rather done with that time. But money is disciplining in that way. And it's actually not – I think that if I watched all the TV I wanted to and I paid $1 an hour, it may well be cheaper than having cable. And I wouldn't have to have commercials and – it seems like it would be way better for me.
Interesting. Well, Connor, I look forward to your guidance on this because I just got cable. It is up and running today for the first time. As an adult, like a grown-up, I have cable and a television, so I will report back as to whether my consumption habits change radically now that it's on the wall as opposed to in my lap.
Yeah. There are certain shows, I'll say, that you can't avoid on cable, and I don't know why this
Law and Order and all of its spin-off franchises.
Yeah, like CSI also,
yes.
It's hard to have cable and not watch an episode of CSI. And I feel like those shows have changed over the years. In my younger days, for example, for some reason, I've watched a lot of episodes of Matlock in my life. And
well, the beauty of those sorts of mysteries, right, is it's a very expected formula. That's why Law and Order was such a joy, that you can pick up an episode at any point. And instantly, you've got, like, the basic plot points, you know who the good guys are, you know who the bad guys are, there's always going to be at least one more twist before they wrap the case up. It's like, the popularity of, like, why I find it very comforting to read John D. MacDonald mystery novels. Like, I know what I'm getting when I walk into it. The plot is mildly different every time, but it's like the comfort food of entertainment.
I was reading some Raymond Chandler when I was on vacation last.
See?
And what? Are you there?
Oh, I said, see, just like that.
Oh yeah. And I love me some Raymond Chandler. Oh man. So let's talk about a different model of TV because Glenn Beck has left cable TV. Let's see if I look at the figures I have here. He was making $2.5 million when he was at Fox News. Mm-hmm. He was drawing 2.2 million viewers on an average weekday evening. He was on at 5 o'clock, which is big numbers for that time slot. And he eventually parted ways with Fox News, I think partly because they felt like he was too much of a discredit to their brand, which is saying something. And he now has started a venture called GBTV, It's $9.95 a month, and he has 300,000 subscribers and advertisers. He is expecting $40 million in revenue in 2012, according to the Wall Street Journal, and it's planning to plow a bunch of those profits back into the network. And he has about 5 hours of programming a day now, and is hoping to get up to 24 hours. And I have selflessly volunteered and plunked down $9.95 a month, and I watched a lot of GBTV. And
so how does that compare to the Law and Orders, etc., that you were watching previously?
Well, I must admit to my surprise that there are shows on GBTV that I think I'd rather watch than an episode of Law and Order.
Stop the presses. Tell me more.
I don't know. No, I don't know. I mean, I've watched hundreds of episodes of Law and Order, so that's part of it. I don't think I'd want to watch hundreds of these.
What's the best show that you saw on there?
Well, let me start with the worst show.
Okay.
The worst show is Glenn Beck's show because it's much the same as it was on Fox News. He, on the episode, one of the episodes that I saw, for example, he drives out in a golf cart for no apparent reason to the middle of the set, and he's singing "The Hills Are Alive" with the sound of music. And he climbs out of the golf cart, and he's wearing this jacket with a kind of silly crest on it that says 1789, and he pulls a pipe out of his mouth, and it's just a ridiculous spectacle. And then he goes and stands in front of a chalkboard, and exactly what you expect happens. There are a lot of things written on the chalkboard, and he explains how, through various conspiracies, they are all connected to one another. And so it's just awful. He's saying lots of things he knows to not be true. There's a lot of ridiculous conspiracy theories, and it is what it is. But there are other shows on the Glenn Beck Network. There is a children's show called Liberty Treehouse, and it is. If I had a child, I wouldn't mind my child watching this show. It's kind of like it's as innocuous as Reading Rainbow, or if the History Channel did a kids show. They go in and tell these kind of interesting anecdotes about history that are interesting even to me. And so one thing that I found fascinating about the Glenn Beck Network is that Glenn Beck's worldview, as it comes across in his show, is that the United States is a dark conspiratorial place that is on the verge of imploding, and there's not much the average person can do. They're just put upon by these elite forces that are... there's just nothing to do except for buy gold and seeds to grow food and guns and just hope that the apocalypse isn't so bad and you can ride it out with your family in the bunker that you've built. And you somehow have these gold commemorative coins that are going to help you even after society is broken down. Whereas the Liberty Treehouse, the things that Glenn Beck viewers want their kids to know, the United States that they want their kids to see is a very different place. It's a place where there's reason for optimism, where the entrepreneurial spirit, even if you're 15 years old, can still help you save enough money for college because you started some cool little business and there's no worry about the government coming and taking it all from you. And it's an optimistic country where most people are generally good and where you should be good to your fellow man. And so another interesting thing, so Benjamin Rush, a figure from American history, was an early advocate against slavery and was a medical doctor. And so they did this little feature on Benjamin Rush, and they called him one of the most noble founders. They said that he lived out, he behaved in a Christ-like way. It's kind of a little bit like non-denominational Christian Liberty Treehouse. I think they're trying to appeal to homeschooling parents. And so one of the anecdotes that they told to explain why Benjamin Rush was such a good guy is that when there was, I forget if this is Philadelphia or Boston, but when there was a yellow fever epidemic, he had the means to flee the city with a lot of the richer people and who went to the countryside so they wouldn't get sick and die.
This is like a public... Okay, let you finish the story. He chose not to.
Yeah. He chose not to. He decided to stay and to, he was a doctor. He decided he was going to stay and help the people in his clinic. And he has some quote about how I'm not even going to paraphrase it very well, but something to the effect of he was aware of the sacrifice that he was possibly making and thought it was the right thing to do. And so it's this very Christian idea of, I am my brother's keeper, I'm going to help and administer to
Well, and it also sounds
sick.
like a very conservative portrait of the world, in that an individual sacrifices as opposed to needing a public health system that could deal with something like that.
Right, true, yeah. So one of my favorite shows on the Glenn Beck Network is a show called Independent USA. And the main character is this guy. Literally the first words he says as the credits are rolling is, "I'm not crazy." And it turns out that he's a guy who has a family and he wants to learn how to live off of the grid. And he isn't a conspiratorial nut. He doesn't think that the society is going to fall apart tomorrow. But, 4 years from now, who knows? It could happen. He wants to be prepared if it does happen. And his family is kind of skeptical of this, but at the same time indulgent of it. And he's a likable guy. They're a lovable family. The show works because of the mix of his enthusiasm and his family's the way I describe him in my piece is that he's a cross between Tim the Toolman Taylor and the least threatening member of the Michigan militia that you can imagine. And he sort of has a wife like Tim the Toolman Taylor's wife, who is skeptical at times, scoffing at times, but ultimately
So, now, question. Connor, do you think that show, right? Because of all the shows you've described, that feels like something that would be right at home on Bravo, right? So...
Yeah. It would totally work on Bravo or TLC or whatever.
Is this a viable new model for television, do we think?
Yes, I think so. I think that, it's apparently making money. The production values are very high. Everything is shot in HD. People seem to like it so far. And so I guess, let me make one quick point before I answer you. And that is that, so you go through shows and he's building a forge, he's building a cannon, he's learning how to build a bunker, he's learning how to grow his own food. And he's saying at various points, if it all goes to hell, I need to be able to protect my family. I want to be the haves, not the have-nots, blah, blah, blah. And it's just interesting to me because, again, there's this disconnect between what the kids show is upholding as the values that you want to live out and what the adult shows are putting forth. In other words, I think actually this guy seems like the kind of guy who'd probably give his neighbors food if the apocalypse came and he was the only one with it. But the tropics of the show is that he's going to live alone and take care of only his family, and that the thing to do is prepare and to disconnect yourself from society and have the weapons to enforce that, and et cetera, et cetera. It's a very different mindset than staying and helping the yellow fever thing. But to get back to the viability of the network, it's fascinating to me that Glenn Beck has come along and made this network work, at least for a year, and been profitable. Even as Al Gore and Current TV seem to be struggling, and Oprah is laying off staffers on her new network. And of course, they tried to build much more ambitious and traditional networks. But at the same time, maybe Glenn Beck was the smart one here and understood what it takes to build a network in the internet era.
And it's all distributed online.
Yeah, well, and you can do it if you have a Roku box or an Apple TV, you can get it on your TV. But yeah, it's web-based.
So he's sort of going the direction of Hulu, even though Hulu appears to be going backward or may possibly go backward.
Yeah, and it's impressive that he's been able to do it, given how you think of his demographic as being older and not very tech-savvy. So the fact that he's been able to do it suggests that maybe another personality could come along and do it.
Connor, you're hitting on something where I actually sort of want to go back to what we talked about earlier about this whole idea that nothing should be the most historic election. I'm not sure it works anymore to say that someone is of an older generation and is not tech savvy.
Well, no, I don't know. Maybe.
I just wonder if. that's such a limiting way to assume that just because someone, I mean, we just decided that I think there are people who are our age or even younger than us who, while they may be familiar with the tools, I still don't think they're very tech savvy because they aren't thinking about the fact that they may have access or an understanding of the tools in a way that an older generation doesn't. Like, to me, being tech savvy is understanding that span that occurs, right? That there are people at all levels, they may or may not have access, they may have a browser and be very familiar with, certain things that they've been set up with, but they don't really understand the interplay between, say, IE, which they've been using forever, and downloading Chrome, and so that's the way in which they're not tech savvy. In the same way that someone who's 15 may not understand why a text message isn't as effective when communicating to their grandparents as an email would be.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know older people that are tech savvy. At the same time, one set of my grandparents has never owned a computer, and there are some older CEO types I know that still have their secretaries print out all of the email that they get and that comes in front of them. I think that especially if you retired before computers came into the workplace, and especially if you don't own a computer and you just have cable and you watch Fox News, and then suddenly you hear that the guy that you watched every day at 5 o'clock is on the internet, I think it's a pretty big hurdle. And I think that people are afraid of the internet, too, some of them. I mean, my grandmother, for example, when I was encouraging her to get a computer, was just terrified that somehow she would get a computer and people would be able to steal all of her information. So I don't know. I mean, I think that hopefully this is going to cease to be true, because if it doesn't cease to be true, then you and I are going to be the old people who have no idea.
I don't understand these emoji things. Works. Somebody teach me.
Exactly. So hopefully we'll be able to stay tech savvy. I don't know. We'll see.
All right. Well, tech savvy. Glenn Beck has mastered it with his television network. But you think that this is a model, right, for how television shows should viably be developed, as opposed to the network model or the Oprah model, right? Because she did it all within creating her own channel and through a standard studio model. Right.
Well, and I don't know that the lines between them are going to be so solid. I can imagine Glenn Beck producing a show that appears on his network, and then he sells and provides content to a cable network.
I guess I also sort of wonder if you contrast him with someone like Oprah. Oprah already had the setup and the infrastructure for a network show that then she tried to transition into a channel. And that's a lot of overhead, right, that was already in place, that the studio infrastructure, the staff, the process, the way that worked, as opposed to Beck, who really started from scratch. I mean, I wonder if part of it was he didn't have to transition anything. He didn't have to switch from one model to a different model. He took all of the knowledge he had from working within the broadcast system and then started from scratch on something that has a much lower overhead than broadcast would.
I mean, the people running Glenn Beck's network, not all of them, but some of them are definitely producers that work.
Right, but I'm saying, like, they didn't have to take an existing like infrastructure, staff, equipment that was geared for broadcast, and then scale it down to something that was internet only. They started as an internet only show, and the overhead there is just a very different thing from doing production for broadcast.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I should say, going to your earlier point about how there are very tech-savvy old people, that sort of is a good segue into our last topic, because I'm thinking of someone who is one of the most bold, forward-thinking, fundamentally savvy, life-changing, really one of the most important figures in American history, who is dropping out of the presidential election. Newt Gingrich. Bold.
Also, to go right back to the beginning, started many internet memes during his candidacy. The sign, I think, of a successful public figure in America today. Dare one say, the most important sign of a public figure in America today.
I think that I just imagine him kind of thrusting one finger into the air and saying, "To the moon, Callista!" And every time I think of that, I smile to myself, and I thank Newt Gingrich for.
I want to thank him for the moon colonies too. My godson called me right after the moon colony thing. He is, I think, 9 years old at this point. He was very excited about Newt getting elected, and he wanted me to be excited too, so that he could become president of the moon. Who can fight that? I couldn't fight that. I mean, obviously, my vote was decided. When your godson tells you to do something, it's game over.
Do you think that other politicians are going to look at the Newt Gingrich campaign and think twice about running for president? Do you think that because I can't think of another instance of a politician running and coming out with an image that has been so drastically diminished, gone from being the object of, oh, he was the guy who back in the 90s orchestrated the takeover of the House, to now most times you hear about him, he is the butt of jokes. It doesn't help to get bit by zoo animals, as he has recently, for any politician. So maybe part of the lesson is stay away from zoos. But
I can't imagine him being any more cautionary than other political campaigns that have failed. I mean, to take another former presidential candidate who's in the news a lot recently, I mean, do you think that people look at John Edwards and are like, man, I really definitely should not consider running for president? I mean, I just don't know that you can separate,
yeah. I mean, for some reason, that don't have an affair while you are.
I mean, which is just to say that I think there are we can look at these examples of past failures and be like, mistakes were made. They are obvious to us, right? But that doesn't.
Mistakes were made is exactly how they put it.
I don't. Obviously, I mean, Edwards is the one who's in the news right now. I don't think that you can compare his campaign and the Gingrich campaign. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm just saying that I don't know that Gingrich is any more cautionary than other failed presidential runs.
Well, and I also wonder, I'm kind of fascinated by Callista Gingrich, because she's such a mysterious character to me.
Also, her masterful use of hairspray.
Well, yeah.
No, did you see there was an amazing slideshow that Time put together of Callista on the trail with her, fantastic hairdo. And I say that with all respect. I think the woman has immaculate grooming.
I wonder, do you think that she comes out of this glad that she encouraged her husband to run for president?
It's funny you should bring that up, because one of the few rules that I hold quite dear in politics and in life is I just don't think you can ever know what goes on inside someone's marriage. I just don't think you can ever know. And so whether she's glad or not glad, I mean, that has to do with the dynamics between the two of them that I would be sort of loath to speak to. There's a fascinating biography that came out a few years ago of the Roosevelt marriage. That part of what I like about it is it doesn't really go deeply into, Eleanor's life but really just sort of tries to lay the history, both of their individual histories and the history of, him as president and her activism and what she did and looked at the ways in which they intersected over the course of their marriage. And it's a very fascinating, I think it's called Franklin and Eleanor. But what's so fascinating is everything that gets left out, right? It ultimately feels a very unsatisfying book because you want to know what was said between the two of them when that moment happened, or when that clash occurred, or when they were trying to make that decision. And, even letters and diaries, it's not going to give you that complete picture. That's part of what I think is so fascinating about a marriage. So...
yeah, I think one reason why Callista Gingrich fascinates me is because, even someone like Barack Obama with such a unique personal past, he isn't such an unfamiliar character to me. I feel like I've met various people who, remind me of him at least in individual aspects, and that I have some touchstones for understanding him. Callista Gingrich, I think that down to a person, every single woman that I know thinks about the idea of her husband running for president or her future husband running for president and is horrified and thinks oh my God, that would be awful. And I certainly think that if my future wife were to run for political office, I can certainly imagine if it was something important to her, being supportive, I cannot imagine wanting it to happen. I cannot imagine it being a pleasant experience or an experience that I would actively choose to go through if she were ambivalent. Like, should I do this or should I not do this? And Callista Gingrich, from what I've read, was encouraging this, and I know that other political wives sometimes do encourage it, and I don't know, maybe political husbands sometimes encourage it too. I don't know, but I don't know anyone like that. And I would like to meet someone like that.
That seems baffling to me. I feel like there have to. I think there must be many more political marriages where there's a lot of encouragement going on about running for higher office. I mean, because right, isn't that that's the undertaking? I don't think anyone has any illusions about the undertaking of running for office at this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. I think it is. I think you're right that there surely are these marriages where people are encouraging, and again, I completely understand being supportive, and I think a lot of people that I know would be supportive if it was something that their spouse really thought was their vocation. I do think, though, that it takes a strange sort of person to like the idea, because there are all these what seem to me like objectively awful things about it. You're thrust into the spotlight. You and your family are under intense scrutiny. Things from your past are dug up. Things that you say are taken out of context. Your appearance is scrutinized. And as the spouse, you're not really able to even engage in the way that you might want to. You're not able to speak your mind. You're not able to respond at times. You just have to keep your mouth shut. So, yeah, it just seems like a tough position to put anyone in.
Listen, I really respect her for wanting to support her partner, to be ambitious on that scale, that this is something that she is sort of diving into and being a political spouse, and that's something that she's taking on. I guess I'm not surprised by it. I think it could be why do we love politics? It's an exciting thing. You're getting a chance to sort of debate ideas, to get out there. Campaigns are tremendously fun and exciting things. So, I don't know, I guess I'm not surprised by the idea that a wife would actually be very supportive of the project and want to get involved with it.
Well, yeah, I do think if she thinks that Newt Gingrich would be good for America.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's some of it, right? Like if you and I may look at it and really question, Newt, why did you, take on the challenge at this time with this platform, or
right.
That's fair enough, but you have to assume that she is looking at it with the blinders of love and marriage and really believes in his political project, and that's something that she's going to go to bat for him for and support. And I think that's fantastic if that's a project she wants to take on.
Yeah, I will say it is admirable both to support your spouse and to encourage people who you think would be a good president to run, even when it puts you out in various ways. Yeah, so are we done? Have we surveyed
we have fully surveyed
and talked about all the
surveyed
important
American
issues?
Society. So I'm always a pleasure, Connor.
Yes, indeed, and I will maybe start watching 30-something and get back to you about what
I look forward to it. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.